Just set at 5.
Good as much. All right, we'll get started now. Thank you, everybody, for being here again. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I'd just like to, my name is David Bridge. I'm the Continuum of Care Coordinator for Arizona Department of Housing. I'll be hosting the webinar today. We also have with us Eliza Loudon from Catholic Charities. She'll also be participating. Catholic Charities is our provider who we've contracted with to administer this program, so she'll be talking about some of the program details. Just a couple housekeeping items. If you could, like I said, we had some technical difficulties. If you could please mute yourself on your phone or whatever you're using, listening on, just so we don't have a lot of background noise. If you want, you can ask questions. There's a questions feature and a chat feature on the webinar. Feel free to put your questions in either one of those, and we'll do our best to respond to those. We'll have some time for questions, some formal time set for questions at the end. I'll try to attach the documents as we go through the presentation, so you'll have them available. They'll also be available afterwards on our website, and we'll give you that link later, and we'll send it out to everybody. So those are just some housekeeping items. Just to go over what we're going to go over today. Today we're going to talk and give some background on the Arizona Landlord Incentive Program the Department of Housing is sponsoring. We're going to give some description of what the program functions are and what resources are available through it. And then we're going to have Eliza, like I said, with Catholic Charities, go through and kind of outline the process for requesting reimbursement and those types of things. So the first thing we just kind of wanted to give some background is why the Arizona Landlord Incentive Program. And this comes from the feedback we've been getting throughout the community from case managers, from housing providers, from voucher providers. Basically, there's two big issues that we're hearing in the community. The first one is there's, because of the economy and everything, we're having a lot of, it's a very competitive rental market. We found some statistics. Let me see if you can see this, but this is just a profile of the last like 20 years what vacancy rates have looked like in Arizona. As you can see, the big spike in 2008 was a result. If you can see this, you can see that in 2009 vacancy rates, that's the height of the recession, we were up to almost 20% vacancy rates in Arizona apartments. That was probably compounded a little bit in our state, maybe by some of the immigration efforts in the state that kind of chilled some people and drove some people out of the state, some out of the rental market. As you can see, as you go down to 2016, where we are now, you can see that that's almost historic vacancy, low vacancy rates for Arizona. We're under 7%. And in some cases, I've seen in some communities that's as low as 3%. So we're dealing with a really competitive market right now in terms of just finding vacancies to start with. With that, we've also seen obviously increasing rents. The market will bear it, so we've seen landlords, very quickly turning units and raising rents. Literally within weeks, bumping it $100, $200 to get more money out of their properties. So take that hard environment, add to the fact that there's always been kind of a stigma in leasing to formerly homeless individuals, especially with awareness of mental health and substance abuse and some of those types of issues. Some of the things we've heard from landlords is they have economic fears. They're concerned about the damage to their property. They're worried that rents won't get paid and they'll be stuck with vacant units. They're worried about the evictions and the costs that go with the evictions. With that, there's also their fear of kind of behavioral issues. Obviously, landlords usually aren't behavioral health specialists, and so they always have concerns about having to deal with, behavioral issues, dealing with disputes with neighbors around mental health or substance abuse. From a neighborhood and safety standpoint, there's concerns that behavioral health or substance abuse issues will lead to police involvement or disruptions of the quiet peace and enjoyment of their properties, or that their property will get a reputation of being some type of negative place to live. So there's those concerns. And then a lot of them, we've heard, have personal histories. In the past, maybe they've rented to somebody through one of our programs. maybe through a different agency than yours, and maybe promises were made about supportive services or things that were going to be provided to help deal with some of those concerns, and it just didn't happen, or they did get stuck in a bad legal situation or eviction situation, and again, the promises that were made by the housing provider were never materialized. And so those all create this kind of stigma around renting to our homeless individuals, or individuals and households exiting homelessness. The combination of these two factors, what that's created is, and we've heard this from numerous providers, numerous programs, rapid rehousing and permanent, it's taking longer to find units for people. You have a voucher, and we've seen this in our numbers, that the time to rent up is much longer. The second thing we've heard is that landlords, because they have this kind of control and flexibility, they've increased their barriers to housing. So, more background checks, more both legal and financial, things with crime-free housing, being much more strict on their enforcement of crime-free housing. So, minor criminal issues, becoming barriers to renting. And then finally, we're hearing anecdotally that even some individuals we've had in housing, there's more likelihood of eviction or termination of our clients, in some cases because they know they can get more than the voucher amount, in the market. And sometimes they just don't want to deal with the HUD requirements or the HQS requirements, or sometimes they just, why deal with this population when I can just deal with the market. So all those things are causing us to have a lot of trouble. Even though we have resources now on the street to house people, we're having a harder time ironically, we're having a harder time getting them housed. And this is the kind of issue that the landlord incentive program is meant to address. So our goals with this program, again, are to address those concerns we just raised. Our goal is to provide some supplementary financial supports so that to kind of address some of those landlord concerns, especially around the economic issues, especially around issues around potential damages that a client might cause, around lost rents or eviction costs when clients vacate units prior to the end of the lease. And also to help us, give us some flexibility maybe with holding some units if we find a good one that we want to make sure that we can fill it with a client. We want to be able to use this as a tool to take out to landlords, to recruit them, to incentivize them maybe to get involved in some of our larger community efforts. And our ultimate goal then is to increase the availability of safe, affordable units for our housing programs and initiatives. Some of the secondary goals that we kind of have is we hope that this will be a tool that will help maybe some dialogue between landlords, service providers, and subsidy providers. Maybe this gives us a chance to talk to landlords and encourage them to be a little more patient with our clients. And again, work on that dialogue between them to address maybe some of those historical issues or some of those other concerns they have. We also want it to, ultimately our goal too is to reduce search times, increase placement rates, free up emergency, in doing that we'll free up hopefully emergency shelter beds and other crisis resources, because we'll be able to move people through quicker. And then the final piece of this is Arizona Department of Housing really has a vision of standardizing programs throughout the state and making the resources available so that all of our balance of state, PEMA, Maricopa all have the same access to resources, things like the incentive program, rapid rehousing vouchers, things like our funds, things like that. And so this is another one of our efforts to try to create a statewide program that benefits everybody rather than having it vary by local jurisdictions and things. So real quickly, the programs that are eligible, who's eligible to access the landlord incentive program? First of all, like I just said, it's a statewide program, so providers in all three of our continua of care can participate, Maricopa County, PEMA, and the balance of state. To us, a housing subsidy provider is someone who provides rental subsidy programs and projects for homeless individuals. So again, it could be our rapid rehousing programs, it can be our permanent housing subsidy programs, it could be some of our voucher programs, it can be SSVF, it can be any of those providers that are providing those services. The requirements that we have for that is, one, though, you do have to be participating and taking referrals from your local coordinated entry project. So again, balance of that would include whatever your county is doing in the balance of state, or the PEMA and Maricopa coordinated entry systems in those communities. Secondly, the program that's participating has to be putting information into HMIS. So whether it's through the service provider or the housing subsidy provider, but they have to be putting data on those units into HMIS, and again, that's in support of the continuum of care for those communities. And one thing we want to make clear, this is not meant to be for site-based or project-based programs. They have other resources for those programs. So this is really focusing on private sector scattered site landlords is who we're really trying to incentivize with this program. Let's see, just make sure we don't have any questions yet or any... Okay. So what is the Arizona Landlord Incentive Program cover? There's basically 3 areas, and we'll go into details on these. The first one is property damage resulting from the client or from a lease.
It looks like something is in here.
One second, we might have a question.
See, I just can't.
Expand.
Is there some way to expand this? I can't.
Let me see. One second. So somebody asked a question about some specific programs in Maricopa County regarding where vouchers have been provided by a local PHA, specifically in support of like a homeless project or a homeless incentive. So the example is in Phoenix. There was a City of Phoenix put units into a housing choice vouchers into a PSH 275 project. Those units were specifically for homeless individuals. What we've talked about this internally is that a PHA in general should not be coming through this program, but for instance in these programs that are specifically targeted to homelessness, we would take requests. Again, it would probably need to come through like the service provider. So and I know CBI, the campus, some agencies like that would be able to access it. And if they're working through like Home Inc. or somebody like that who's kind of brokering those relationships with the landlords, they would have access. We would think that they would have access. But in general, this wouldn't be available for all housing choice voucher programs through a housing authority. It would just be for those specific homeless programs. I hope that answers the question. Back to what's covered under the program. So again, property damages. So again, damages resulting from a lease with an individual in one of these programs. The second would be any lost rent due to an eviction or abandonment of unit prior to the end of a lease. And then finally, there's a provision that we can do a couple weeks of holding a unit or a vacancy with the guarantee that they'll accept one of our clients into their units, so we can hold units when we're doing search and those types of things. To go into the details on each of those, first thing we want to cover is the amount available. So the first one is damages. Under our damages policy, the limit to damage reimbursement would be $2,000 for a 1-bedroom or smaller unit, like an efficiency, or up to $3,500 for a multiple bedroom unit, so a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom up. We want to make it clear that reimbursement is only available for damages above any kind of security deposit or fees that the landlord has already collected. So we would apply those to the damages first, and then this program would cover whatever's above that. And Eliza will cover a little bit of that with the forms and things. We also want to make clear that if the landlord already kind of has a mitigated damage clause in their lease, or if they already have kind of set costs assigned to certain types of repairs or damages, then we'll obviously be sticking to those lease values so that we don't get, there's no cheating going on. In terms of eligibility, property damage, this program started June 1st, so we're asking that it apply to damages that occur after June 1st and also with leases that occur after June 1st. So we're not trying to go back in time and cover everybody who's currently in permanent housing. This is a program really going forward. Obviously, the property damage must be a result of the tenant's occupancy while in the agreement and in the unit. And then one thing we're doing for rapid rehousing programs, we will cover damages in rapid rehousing programs for up to 3 months after the person is dropped off of their subsidy. That's to help with that transition period after they've left their subsidy. In case they fail. The key is though that they have to stay in that unit for at least 3 months after after the end of the subsidy. So, but that does give a little more flexibility to rapid rehousing programs and to help us keep rapid rehousing programs in the system. Other eligibility things, obviously we're not going to be covering wear and tear and kind of routine maintenance when an apartment owner needs to turn over a unit. This is for extra damages directly caused by the tenant. The landlord does need to agree that they'll lease to a new client that is referred to them by our program. So again, taking another client out of the coordinated entry system is part of their, again, incentive to stay in the program. In terms of eligible damages, as you can imagine, obviously we'll cover any damage to structure, fixtures, carpets, drapes, things like that. We will pay for the repair of minor household fixtures that came with the apartment, so microwaves, stovetops, things like that. We'll also cover furnishings in furnished units. Again, I know some landlords provide schedules of how much each of those things is worth, and if they do provide those schedules, that'll be kind of the max of the replacement value that we'll pay. We will pay for special cleaning, so if there's like biohazard needed due to food or waste that's left behind, we will. Those can be included in the costs. One thing we won't pay for though is costs related to death. So if I know in some cases when a client's expired, there's additional biohazard required for that, or there may be removal fees, or there may be other types of costs. Those aren't part of what we'll cover, but we'll cover other types of biohazard related to the person's tenancy.
Drug use.
Yeah, so like for instance, if there was certain types of drug use, or I'd say meth lab or something like that, where it requires some additional mitigation to clean up the unit, those are things that we'll cover. And then finally, if there's really excessive damage, the place is just trashed, this money can go towards the deductible. So rather than, pay, well, we only go up to a couple $1,000s, if there's more damages to that, we can put our funds toward the deductible. Again, less any money that's already been collected from any kind of deposits or fees that the landlord might charge. Let me just make sure. In terms of vacancy and evictions and abandonment, again, the amount that's available is up to $1,000. Again, for eligibility, the client will have had to have obviously broken the lease agreement, and been evicted or abandoned the unit prior to the term of their lease. Again, the landlord would have to agree to take a new client that we referred to them, and hold that unit so that we can put a new client into it. We want to make it clear that we won't pay for, we'll pay for the lost rent from an eviction. We won't pay eviction legal fees or other types of fees related to the eviction, notice costs, and all those types of things. Again, this would be for leases signed after June 1st. And on this one, again, the big part is we won't pay. Again, with $1,000, obviously we're not going to pay, if the person moves out after 3 months, we're not going to pay 9 months worth of rent. It's mainly for that month or two while we find a new client to place in those units. One thing we want to talk about too with vacancies and with damages is that we do see in some cases we may need to layer both of those being available in a situation. So for instance, if a client is evicted, trashes the apartment, a landlord could request funds to get reimbursed for the damages that that client caused, but then they could also request the vacancy funds so that they could pay for that unit while they're doing the repair and while we wait to put another client into it. So in theory, somebody could request layer these various incentives together to cover their economic losses.
Okay, we have some questions. Do you want to answer them now?
We have a couple questions that we'll speak
When you
to.
say third-party payments after security deposit is applied, does that include payments from COC programs? Yes. Any other thing that you would use, this is like any program, sort of the payer of last request. If there's money in your COC program, and there is, then you use that before making a request to this program. Or can we just no? And no, it's not for you to save your money. And will damages only be paid if the client leaves a unit? It'll be on a case-by-case basis, you guys. It depends on how extensive it is and what we're doing. The idea is to keep the client in the unit. If the landlord would be willing to do that, I sometimes think, I'm thinking in terms of excessive damages. I question if the landlord would let the client stay. So some of these things are not going to be black and white and are going to have to occur, and we'll talk about them when they occur.
One of the things we talked about too that had come up in our kind of when we were doing some review and some community questions just related to this is somebody asked, could you do this multiple times for a client, or could you do it multiple times for a landlord? So say a landlord had multiple units in a property that was participated in these programs. Our intent would be that yes, that a landlord could request it multiple times around different apartments or different clients. Again, if a client had been in multiple housing situations and we've tried to keep them in housing like Carrie was talking about, and we're trying to keep them stable and they had done damage in a couple places, then yes, we would consider funding the same client in multiple situations. I think the goal though in both those situations would be to kind of look at history at some point, and if the client's continuing to have these kind of incidents, then it may be an issue of not being appropriate for permanent housing, or maybe it's an issue with service supports. But we'd want to again, that's where like I was saying in our goals, that would be where we'd hopefully be encouraging some of this dialogue between voucher providers, service providers, clients, and landlords. But again, for now, we're saying that yes, a landlord could request it multiple times on multiple units, and a client, if they were in multiple housing situations, could use it, multiple times. Hopefully not too many, but again, the hope would though, we'd also be looking at those for patterns and see if we could mitigate.
Does the landlord have to agree to continue to work with the program or specifically re-rent that unit? Not necessarily that unit, but the purpose behind the program is to keep our landlords and to engage new ones. As we go forward, if there starts being tons of claims, we're not getting new landlords, we're not keeping the ones, or else we're keeping the ones that we had anyway, then the purpose of the program really wasn't achieved. And once the money's gone, it's gone. So I can only reiterate that, or reiterate not being a word, that the purpose is to alleviate landlords' fears and concerns. And yes, we want them to have this money available to them for the worst damages that we know can occur. And that is for you to sell it that way and to use it as a way to get landlords on board. So it's not, do they have to? We can't make them, and it doesn't have to be that unit. It's the idea of, yes, sir, we had a client who damaged your unit. Please put into the program, and we want you to continue to work with us. Do they have other clients housed there? Do we feel confident that they'll rent to us again? But it's not about any particular unit immediately being refilled, although that would be ideal. Sounds like somebody's running up and down the stairs. Okay. No, we will not be doing marketing of this program. That's the point of this webinar. In order to go statewide with this program, it's for those of you who are out there doing scattered site leasing, And when you engage a landlord or you're trying to engage a landlord, to be able to say, we have this program. We did put a brochure together for you to use, but we are not going out and marketing it. It's a marketing tool that we are funding and hope to help you use to engage landlords. There may be a time where we have the ability to have housing locator people that specifically work with landlords, and then this would be the tool that they would use. But as it is right now, we had looked at several states across the country who have a landlord mitigation program. They thought that it worked. There is not a lot of them by any means, and none of them that run a statewide program. They are all urban located. They found that landlords liked knowing it was available. Not a lot of landlords applied to the program. And so those are all things that we have no idea whether that will hold true here or not. We chose to try and make it go statewide. As David pointed out, that our, vacancy rate across the state is at an all-time low. We are having difficulty. We're even losing some landlords that we have had involved in our programs for years. So we'd like to be able maybe to use this as a way to maintain them. But no, we are not taking on the marketing piece. It is a tool for you to use at the program level. I think that's the end of the questions.
So just back to the last thing that we can reimburse for that we'll have available. We have contemplated putting funds available for what we would call unit holds. So if a landlord needs, if we wanted to give some money for to hold a unit for a couple weeks while we get the client prepped or found or moved in or part of that search process, we would want something from the landlord in terms of eligibility. We would want something from the landlord stating that they're willing and that they're going to hold that unit for one of our clients referred. And we'll pay basically either up to half a month's rental, or we'll prorate it for however many days we hold that unit. So, if it's a week, we'll cover a week's worth of rent to help that client, to help hold that unit for search and things like that. With that, I'm going to ask Eliza to unmute herself if she can, and talk a little bit about how the process is going to work in terms of submitting paperwork and things like that. Eliza?
Okay, here I am. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, so this is how the program is going to work. Everyone should be receiving copies of the packet that essentially has the form needed to apply for these funds. So the first thing we want you all to do as housing subsidy providers is to go over the participation agreement with the landlord. So that really lays out what you can expect, what it's to cover, and the purpose of it. So once again, it's great. Not only is it great to onboard a landlord, but then when you guys have the conversation regarding the damages, it helps us to follow back around and talk about the purpose of this. And really, the mission is to maintain this unit for an individual experiencing homelessness. So once the landlord and the housing subsidy provider have gone over that participation agreement, we ask that the landlord sign that, and that is going to be included with the copy of the claim. So after that has been done, then the landlord is going to complete the program fund request form, and that is a basic form that goes into the math or the dollars that have been spent or projected to be spent on this. Depending upon the amount, we will ask for quotes, and we'll ask, and those will be included as well. But it just breaks down what is the cash for damage, and then it actually subtracts the deposited. So there's the formulas in there that should be able to help. So the person that completes that is going to be the landlord. The then the landlord is going to turn that over to the housing subsidy provider. At this point, the housing subsidy provider takes over the process. So the provider is going to look at that fund request form and ensure that it's accurate. You know, I mean, we hope that you know your landlord well enough to know that what they're asking for is really what is reasonable and what is actually going to be charged. So look it over, make sure that it's accurate, it's complete, that all of the, if we ask for quotes, if we ask for additional items in that cover sheet, that those are included. And then it's the housing subsidy provider that signs the cover sheet before submitting. So the housing subsidy provider is responsible before submitting to making sure that that's complete. So if they have to go back to the landlord, it's really in their wheelhouse to negotiate these things with the landlord and to make sure that everything is in that packet before submitting. So let's say, so everything is in the packet, the cover sheet is signed by the housing subsidy provider. They will then, we ask that you scan that, all of the entire packet, and email it to the email listed, alipa@pc-ec.org. So we can go to the next slide, David. So, Carrie, are there any questions about that process so far?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
So once the housing subsidy provider has emailed that, we ask you include the landlord's contact information, the landlord's email, because we as the administrator will want to send the landlord and the provider verification the packet has been received. So we want to assure both of you that their packet has been received. We ask for 5 days to review the packet for completeness. At that point, we will be coordinating between Arizona Department of Housing, making sure the program meets all of the guidelines and is eligible for this. And within those 5 days, we will notify you whether there's corrections that need to be made or if it's an exception. So we'll give us 5 days to turn that around if there needs to be any kind of corrections made. If corrections are made and the packet is accepted, the administrator will be sending an email to the landlord and the provider once again that the packet has been submitted for payment. So you will receive an email from us that says everything's complete, it's submitted for payment, and then the landlord will expect the payment within 30 days. One thing to note, folks, is that we do ask for a W-9 for the landlord, and we will be mailing payment out to the address listed on the W-9. So if that is not the address where the landlord prefers the payment to be sent, please make a note of that, as we will defer to the W-9 on our payments. And I think that's it for me. Unless there's questions.
2 questions came up. One's a question, one's a recommendation. The first question is, could this cover things like bed bug infestations?
I'm not leaning towards that.
Carrie said earlier it'd be case by case. I think the hard thing with bed bugs would be, how would you prove that it's specifically our clients, or that that wasn't some. I don't think we intend to fumigate an entire building or facility. So at this point, I guess our initial reaction would be no, it wouldn't cover bed bugs unless we had some kind of definitive proof that it was related to our client, which I think would be somewhat hard to do. The second question, or the recommendation, was, is there any way we could expedite it shorter than 30 days to get that payment returned to the clients? Returned to the landlord. I'm guessing Catholic Charities, we gave 30 days, gives them some time to do this, but hopefully we would be processing them faster than that. And that's one thing, once we have a little bit of experience, maybe we can go back and look at it and see if we want to shorten that time.
I would say that's accurate, David. I think that we will try to do it as fast as we can, but 30 days allows us the time that we need to make sure it's processed correctly.
And then there was a question about what was the time. Oh, sorry, there's one over in there. Sorry. The question is, will Catholic Charities accept a W-9 from providers? We have them for our purposes. I think a W-9 is one of the things that we need as part of the packet.
But he's asking,
Can
they
they provide
already
it?
have them.
I think if you,
Yeah,
if they're within the last 12 months.
yeah, as long as it's current, and I think, again, this is part of that communication packet, and that's why we want the housing subsidy provider to help put that packet together before it comes to to the Catholic Charities. It's so that if you have that documentation, you can put it in for the landlord, or you can make sure that they have everything they need. And if you already have some of that documentation to expedite that process, then I would say, and you've already maybe had some of the inspection documents, things like that are things that you could attach to help them process their claim, and that would help build your relationship with the landlord. Sorry, these questions are hard to read on here.
There's got to be a way to make that bigger. I just don't know what it is.
We got there was some statements, somebody had some questions about the bed bugs and landlord-tenant law. We'll have to go back and look at those. Again, our initial reaction is not to cover those type of mitigation or bio issues, but we will go back and look at this based on what somebody posted saying that we may be responsible for it under the landlord-tenant. But we'll go look at that and get a definitive answer.
I mean, who's been responsible before this? This is for once again, I can't help but emphasize that this is for those things that really have kept landlords from renting to our clients. And the truth is, the bed bug issue kind of goes above and beyond just our clients. Anyone can damage a unit, and we know that as well. But we'll take a closer look. We'll just see. I mean, the intent is not for all this money to go fighting bed bugs.
So, again, thank you for your patience with our technical issues at the beginning. One of the things, just to reiterate, is this, like Carrie was saying, this is a pilot program. We have tried to base it on what we've seen other communities use and other strategies other communities have used. But as a pilot program, we really would appreciate your feedback, and to make sure that this program is useful. So again, once you start using it, once you, go through the process a couple times, feel free to give us your feedback. On this we'll make this PowerPoint available. You have my contact information as well as Eliza's. Feel free to send me emails or call with any kind of suggestions or anything you think we also need to consider in this process or in this program. But really, like Carrie has said, our hope would be that this really is a tool to help you engage landlords. Again, if they are giving you feedback on the program, that it's useful or not useful, or things that they think would make it more useful, again, feel free to share that. No guarantees, but feel free to share that, so that if we do need to, if we do see that this is a valuable program and decide to continue it, we can continue to enhance it and make it better. With that, there's one more question that came through. Question is, one question is there any kind of regional limits or is there any regional limits or agency limits? The only limits in the program right now are specifically the ones that were up there around the individual interventions. Again, so, multiple, we know that there's different size agencies, and some will probably use the program more just because of the size of their programs. One thing, like I said earlier, though, we would probably want to look at, if we're seeing a whole lot of claims coming from one provider, or we're seeing a whole lot of claims coming from one apartment complex, again, we're going to be keeping these records with, through Catholic Charities, and our hope would be that we could circle back to those agencies and make sure that these are, that it's not an issue of services, inadequate services, make sure that it's not an issue of a landlord who may be providing, poor housing or not, or taking advantage of the program. But no, at this point there would be no limits by geography or by a provider or by a given program. We would understand that in some cases, it could just be because of the size of the program or the amount of units that they have under contract. In terms of, somebody asked funds available. Right now, again, we have about 100, is 125,000?
I don't even know that it's important.
Is what we have available on kind of this pilot basis. But again, a lot of it is going to be in this first couple months, seeing how long that funding lasts and see kind of what the requests are for it. And then again, and what impact it's had in terms of recruiting landlords. So again, why we need your feedback. And then we would decide if we wanted to renew the program or invest additional dollars into it, expand it, those types of things. But really, it's going to be key that we get your feedback and that we see that the program's having an impact. One other question. Somebody asked a question, and this would be something I don't have an immediate answer for. Maybe Carrie does. Is if the landlord, let's say that the one agency had, a number of claims a month, could they pay them directly to expedite the payment to the landlord, and then we would reimburse the housing provider for what they paid to the landlord?
I'd have to think about it, but I would prefer not to go down that road.
But we can look at it. And again, if we did do anything like that, it would be subject to the same limitations, in terms of the amounts and things like that. But let us look at that. Again, I know some of these things, I hate to say, are going to be case by case, but I know there's some unique, some of these grants have unique funding structures. I know some of the landlord-tenant relationships sometimes have unique subcontracts, some lessees, things like that. So if you have any questions like that, feel free to call us or Eliza, and then, like I said, we can work on it and get an answer to you. I didn't get a chance to upload. Somebody asked a question, where are the forms? We're going to get them up on our website, on the ADOH website. The link is below where the forms are. Give us an afternoon to get those uploaded, but we will get those up to the website for you. I didn't have a chance to put them on because of our technical difficulties. I didn't have a chance to put them on to the webinar. So again, if we'll put those up, we'll try to get those up as well as the recording of that today. This webinar today. With that, unless there's any other questions or any other comments, thank you again for your patience with our technical difficulties, and thank you most importantly for all the work that you guys do in the community. I mean, one of the things that we recognize is that it's all about collaboration, and we hopefully can give you some resources to make your jobs easier but if we're going to meet our goals of housing people and engaging people and ending homelessness, it really comes down to you guys on the doing the case management, doing the work, working with the landlords directly, like Carrie was saying earlier. So thank you for that commitment. Again, give us feedback so that we can make this a useful tool for you to do your jobs. So
hope it helps. Thanks so much, and happy 4th of July weekend.